Hi all, I am Christina McPhillips and I'm really pleased to be here today and to be talking with you and to have this wonderful webinar with some pals of mine. We've got some great people that are going to come on the line now, and we are going to be discussing how to host a virtual fundraising event. We've got Greg Giles, and we'll have Laura Vitko and Liz Boyd. And while we get situated on our end, I just wanted to do a couple of really quick housekeeping items. So you know you are all muted, and we are recording this session, and we'll send that link to the recording out tomorrow. We're also going to do a really lengthy Q&A at the end, so please chat any of your questions to us in the question box as we go along. It's completely fine to do that, and we'll do all the questions at the end. I wanted to say that this webinar really kind of came from a webinar we had about a month and a half ago that was about Library Giving Day, and Laura spoke with us briefly about the event that we're going to talk about today. And a number of you had questions, and we wanted to make sure to address those questions because we're always about sharing knowledge. So that's why we're here. Let me briefly introduce our pals on the line today. So we have Greg Giles, Senior Director of Development at the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Then we have Laura Vitko, the Individual Giving Manager at the St. Paul Public Library. And then we have Liz Boyd, who is the Director of Special Events at the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. And I think that that's about it. And I'll very, very briefly just give an introduction about Carl Bloom Associates. We are a full service fundraising agency, and we've been doing direct mail and digital fundraising for libraries for about 45 years. And with that, Greg, will you tell us about you?
Thanks, Christina. I'm Greg Giles with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library, coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota, previously known as Bedote, for the Dakota name for the land of the people who were here before we were. Thrilled to be here today with two of my really awesome colleagues. The Friends of the St. Paul Public Library, we're celebrating our 75th year this year. We were founded in 1945. And let's just say that the celebrations we had planned changed a little bit because of things that happened this year, including Opus and Olives, one of our big signature events that we'll talk more about. The Friends, in addition to fundraising, we also do advocacy. We do programming, both locally for the St. Paul Public Library and also for libraries around the state. We are the Minnesota Center for the Book. That's a designation from the Library of Congress. So we work all around the state and actually all around the country through our library strategies consulting group. So we're thrilled to be here and look forward to talking with you and taking questions from you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So Liz, as you know, our event guru on the line, could you briefly introduce Opus and Olives to everybody listening?
You bet. We're in our 17th year this year. We just finished our 17th Opus and Olives. We started out as a 350-person event in a hotel ballroom, and just last year, or 2019, we were about 950 people in a convention center. It's a Sunday night event. It goes from 5 until 9. We have a reception with book sales and an opportunity to meet and greet the authors. Dinner, we sit down for dinner at about 6:30 and the show starts about at 7. We have 5 authors and one serves as MC, and each of the authors gives about a 10 to 12 minute presentation. And we wrap up at 9, and there's more author meet and greet if our guests want to buy more books and get them signed. And that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go through some of the questions that we have. One of the big things that I know people were interested in is the moment that you really decide to go virtual. So Liz, can you talk to us about how you came to that decision, you know, how it seemed appropriate for you, and then we'll go deeper into it with some questions for Greg about, you know, who to consult when you're deciding to go that route. But Liz, I'll let you go first.
You bet. It was in May that it was becoming increasingly clear that we weren't going to be able to hold this event. And, you know, if I can say anything right off the bat, it's just make your decision and embrace it, because otherwise you're going to end up creating 2 completely different events and not knowing what you're going to go with until the last minute. So what we did in May was we put out a request for proposals to production companies and got 11 responses from all over the country. We met with them on a Zoom call so we could answer all their questions. We received proposals from 10,000 to 75,000. And in fact, the group we went with was somewhere in between. And we could tell from that Zoom call, they just got us and understood us. And so we hired them. We had a great rapport with them. And we laid out with them what we want to accomplish and what we want to do. And they immediately helped set us straight that there was a lot of it we weren't going to be able to do. And then we just processed over the summer months and came down to what it was we really wanted to accomplish. And it's quite remarkable how it changed from the beginning to what we ended up with in the end. And, you know, there's one comment I want to make. And, you know, we had a solid budget to hire a production crew. And I understand that a lot of our guests today don't have that budget, but do keep in mind that an expert could be, you know, a college kid or a high school kid or one of these younglings that know how to manipulate the internet and put on an event for you. So it doesn't have to be a huge financial undertaking, but embrace the idea and just go with it and realize what you're going to create is going to be nothing like what you've had in person in the last years before.
And I would think the logical next thought for the folks that are listening today is, who do they need to consult internally when making this really large decision? So who are the key stakeholders? Did you have to go to your board, your staff, your sponsors? Can you tell me about that?
Sure, I'll take that one. This was a staff decision. We do have a volunteer committee of our board that is on this, but this was Liz and the team. And one of the things that is great about the Friends of St. Paul is that we are a true team. But we made the decision and then brought it to the board. And our board, we have 48 people on our board of directors. They're a governing board. They are not a day-to-day board. And that's the way hopefully your board is too. And the sponsors and other stakeholders, I mean, we reached out to them and stayed in good communication with them. You know, the key to remember, they want you to succeed. Your sponsors are there, your board is there because they want you to succeed. And so for us, you know, we had them stay with us. We had almost all of our sponsors renew. Those that didn't, it was an economic decision. Obviously, you know, this year was really rough on a lot of companies, and especially this summer when there was still a whole lot of unknown, which is when we were getting the bulk of our sponsorships. But really it was, you know, communicate, bring people along, you know, work with your team, identify your team. As Liz said, you know, anytime you do an event, you've got a team of vendors and a team of people you're coordinating with. And this is no different in that sense. You're going to have different people at the table, but you're still going to have a lot of people at the table. And for us, communication was really, really key. Just let people know, even if you don't know it yet, just say, hey, we're still working on this. We're going to know this hopefully in a couple of weeks. And then, you know, a couple of weeks turns into a month and a half, but let them know what's going on. But like I say, the key is they're there to help you. They want you to succeed.
Okay, so when you are saying, okay, we're going to do this, what are the key questions that need to be asked in preparing? Kind of walk us through the step-by-step, if you could, Laura.
Yeah, so some of the general key questions I would recommend you start with are, what do you want to accomplish with your virtual event? What are those specific goals you have? And who is your audience? So in the case of Opus and Olives, our goal was to provide an engaging and entertaining experience for our event attendees. We really viewed this as a special event, and we also understood by this point in time that there was such a thing as Zoom fatigue, and we wanted to provide an experience that really felt special for our guests. Another key question or a key goal for us was to tell the story of the library and how we were going to do that. As you're planning to tell the story of your library and the impacts it makes on your community, think, are there staff, are there board members, are there library staff, community members that can provide a testimonial and help your larger audience understand the amazing and incredible things your library is doing. And of course, because this is a fundraising event, we also had goals, specific goals for raising revenue. I would recommend early on that you make the decision if you are going to make this a free event or a ticketed event. We decided to go down the route of making it a ticketed event. And so we structured ticket sales in a way where we also hoped that people would make an additional philanthropic gift. We had sponsorship levels and sponsorship packages. And then we also thought through, how are we going to make the fundraising ask? We did do a verbal ask during the program, but we really complemented that with some videos that we produced about the library to tell the story of the library during the program. As you are planning for your fundraising ask, you may want to package it with a direct mail appeal, or you may want to do an email campaign or social media campaign to bring in revenue. So those are some of the things I'd encourage you to think about. And then finally, when thinking of who is your audience, we have a lot of people that have been longtime supporters of the Friends and longtime attendees of Opus and Olives, and we wanted to bring them along in this new virtual environment. So we really thought through, how do we make people feel connected and appreciated? I think this is a great opportunity to reach out to people at a time when, we're all feeling the effects of isolation, and just really convey how appreciative you are of their support during this challenging year. Another thing I'd encourage you to consider is how you can bring a new audience into attending this event. We no longer have the geographic barriers where, you have to live within so many miles of the city to attend, and you have to be available, at this specific time. If you're recording your event too, that's a great way to engage people after the fact. So just think broadly about who your audience is or who your audience could be.
I really love that you said you can include people that are not within driving distance. And that opens you up to a brand new world of prospective event attendees. So thanks for that.
Just to put Laura and Liz on the spot, do you remember how many people we had, how many different states we had represented?
I think it was 24.
That's the number that came to my mind too. So yeah, we had 24.
Yeah. As opposed to Minnesota and Wisconsin, which it typically is.
Yeah.
That's great. That is really exciting. That's not something that you can normally accomplish. Fantastic.
Not at all.
So let's talk about the virtual environment and what works and what doesn't. Formats, if you could fill us in on formats, platforms, the kind of program you're going to be putting on, all of that. We'd love to know more.
Yeah, as I said before, you're creating a whole new event. I mean, Opus and Olives 2020 looks nothing like any event we'd had before. But as I said, just make your decision and go with it, and then embrace, what's new and what you can handle. With respect to author events or author involvement, we were fortunate enough to have Mo Rocca sign up as our MC very early on before, and I always felt a little guilty because it was kind of bait and switch with him, but he stayed with us. He was lovely to work with, and he served as the MC. And what we did differently, we changed up the format. We typically had the authors get up and give a presentation, but because we had Mo Rocca, we thought, let's do some interviews too. And so we did that. And the sell to the other authors, by the time we were recruiting them, was almost a little easier because they weren't required to travel and spend 2 nights in St. Paul. And I promised Greg I wouldn't mention St. Paul as if it was a bad place to go. It's just the fact that they had to travel and spend 2 nights there. It could be anywhere for that matter. But now they could record their part from their own home, and which I would love to add. People love seeing these authors' homes, which, we all kind of do on Zoom calls now. The one takeaway, the huge takeaway we had from Opus and Olives this year was people said that it felt much more intimate. And believe it or not, that's what these, face-to-face calls allow us to have is a more intimacy with our audience. And, you know, it's a huge change sitting in front of your screen at home as opposed to sitting in a room of 950 people and 4 screens in the corners and a little tiny podium, you know, up front in the distance. And so we really banked on that intimacy and were rewarded greatly for it. And you asked another question, Christina, when we talked about this, was how do you keep your audience involved and engaged? And, you know, the learning curve for this old woman was off the charts when it comes to platforms, what that word even means, you know, um, and you know how we present it. And the most beautiful part of the evening was the opportunity to chat, which I had never heard of. It's a scene that goes up the right side of your screen, and our guests were talking to each other and asking each other questions and sending. Did his part live, and so they were sending questions to Mo, and it was just so much fun, and it really built that community that we thought we were going to be missing when we're all partying together. And it really was great fun. And, you know, just with respect to the presentation, just to reiterate what Laura said earlier, we had, you know, a great opportunity to incorporate our message about the library, our message about the Friends, our solicitations to donate. You know, Mo Rocca kept saying, scroll down, you know, and donate. And so we really took advantage of getting our message out during this event. And there again, I feel like we met with great success. We raised a lot of money that night, raised a lot of awareness, and really had a fun time. Great feedback from the event this year. So we're and by the way, we've already decided to go virtual again in 2021 because, as I said, we're not in the position to plan 2 different events. We've really got to focus on one and go with that. So we're going to do it all again.
Yeah, all right. Well, I hope that it will be smooth sailing the second time around. Okay, and I want to tell the audience, again, feel free to chat your questions. I see we're getting a few of them. We will answer them at the end, but if something pops into your head, feel free to write it down and we'll go to it in a few minutes. So I think a lot of people are wondering about the technical side of everything. And Laura, could you tell us a little bit about what the audience needs to think about from a technical point of view, what kinds of platforms, what the technology that the actual viewers will be using, the event attendees, if you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, certainly, happy to. So I would say one of the things that will influence your decision about what platform you use for technology or for hosting your virtual event is, are you going to have everybody access the event using the same link, or are you going to sell tickets and provide a unique access code for every attendee? We went the route of providing everyone a unique access code. So we knew that we would kind of have to have this role of being a gatekeeper and making sure everyone accessed their specific event code. If you are going to make it an open event where it's free for everyone, I would really encourage you to use some user-friendly platforms like YouTube or Facebook Live for hosting your event. If you are going to provide unique access codes, the platform we went with was called Patron Technology and their product GrowTix. The nice thing about that platform is we were able to embed our donation button and our text to give information on the screen where people were viewing the video feed. The other nice thing is that people clicked on their URL to take them to the web page, and they could use that on any standard web browser, so Google Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer. So it was pretty foolproof from a technology standpoint. However, that being said, I would encourage you as an organization to talk through what is your technology troubleshooting plan, both in advance and for the night of the event. It could be as simple as having an email address and phone number available to attendees so that if they did have problems, they could contact someone on your staff and get some support with how, you know, to troubleshoot their access to the virtual event. I would say to try and communicate out what the technology needs are to your audience in advance as well. So we sent emails telling people they would receive a unique access code on this date, and then they would click through that link to access the event. And I think we had maybe 4 calls the night of the event with technical issues, but they were all easily resolved. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, great. Lots of good questions coming in. Laura, actually, a couple of people want to know, can you say your platform again, and could you spell that really quickly?
Certainly. It's Patron, Patron technology, and then the specific platform that they own is called Growtix, Growtix.
Okay, great. Okay. So a couple more questions before we go to the Q&A. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of everything. And how did you ask people for a gift? How did you make the solicitation? How do you logistically take donations? And then can you tell us about the offerings and what changed as opposed to previous year and what value you provided to attendees? And I think Laura and Liz, if you could cover those things.
Yeah, well, I'll start with talking more about the nuts and bolts of how to make the ask and how to plan for it. I would say if you, especially if you are hosting a free event, um, require registration and build in an option to make a philanthropic gift with that registration form. People are already filling out their information, so it's certainly easy to add your credit card number to make a gift to the organization you support. Another thing that we did, because we did decide we were going to make it a ticketed event, we have a lot of donor data already in our database called Razor's Edge. And so we made the decision to actually sell tickets through Razor's Edge, where we could have more control and have a better understanding of these people attended and made a gift in the past, and they've already made their commitment again this year. So kind of think through what your data needs are in as far as tracking ticket sales or donations if you're choosing to go that route. We also had a text to give option that we promoted the night of the event, as well as online giving forms. What we did not do is kind of a telethon or phone in with a gift phone option, but you certainly can do that if you feel that's something your audience would respond to. And we did, through our communications, there was always the option to make a gift in advance of the event. You could make an additional gift with your ticket purchase or in advance of the event, but we kind of had, I would say, like a 30-60% split with revenue. That 30% of the revenue came in advance of the event, and then 60% the night of or post event for donations.
That's great. Okay. And Liz, what about the offerings? What changed from the in-person event to a virtual event? And how did you still provide value to the people that were attending?
Yeah, and that started out as a big question when we were trying to determine whether to charge or make it a free event. But we really decided we'd stick with a ticketed event because that's how it's been, and it makes it more exclusive, and that's not a bad thing. And typically we give dinner and wine and dinner and a show, as I always call it, but we had no option for dinner this year. So we came up with the concept of party bags, and we have a great Opus and Olives committee made up of community members and board members and staff. And we went round and round, and we ended up creating custom bags with the friends' information on it. We had in the bags we had custom wine glasses. Our tagline is a benefit with friends, which we put that on the wine glasses. We had custom face masks donated by one of our board members, napkins, window clings. We did the printed program, which it didn't change really from what we provide in the past. And then we went to a St. Paul institution called Candyland, and we got popcorn, candy, nuts, chocolates, just all sorts of things. And people just loved this because it's nothing like a traditional vendor, in your neighborhood. And then, of course, we had pouches of olives because this is Opus and Olives. And who knew olives came in pouches, but they do. And people really loved it. I wish we could share with you all the pictures shared online and Facebook and Twitter and all that. But the biggest surprise with respect to the bags was, we were trying to figure out how we were going to get them to everybody. And we decided in the end to have them pick up the bags. And that initially was just decided on a saving cost of delivering them. Well, it turned out to be a magnificent opportunity for our president as we delivered, 250 bags, I can't remember, 280 bags. We got to greet each of our guests one by one and, in person and thank them at a distance with a mask, of course. But you don't have that opportunity when you're in a room full of 900 people, and so it really gave our president an opportunity to speak with all our donors personally, which we hadn't counted on, but it turned out to be a real benefit for us.
I love your ideas within the bag, and I'm sure the audience will have questions about that. So A+, fantastic, really funny stuff. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up this and go ahead and go into the Q&A shortly, but when you look back, what are the learnings here? What are 3 things you wish you knew before you got started? And what do you want libraries who are thinking about doing this to know?
Yeah, I think, the real key, and it's funny because all 3 of us were in a meeting this morning where we're looking at doing our other big event of the year, which is the Minnesota Book Awards, and moving that also virtually. Last year it was also virtual because it was about 5 weeks after the first shutdown order came that our event was scheduled. So that one we had to pivot very quickly. But one of the things that we really spent a lot of time discussing this morning was, what can you do virtually that you cannot do into your real life event? And that's the real crux of it because, as Liz said, it's a different event. And embrace that because there are things you can do that you can't do in a ballroom or in a dining room or wherever you have your event, in a library space. So how can you take advantage of that? And I think that's the number one place to start. Once you've figured out, as Laura said, your goals, what are you trying to accomplish? Then, step back and, being able to do the interviews back and forth with the authors, something we'd not ever done before. The long list that poor Elaine Hopkins, our director of programs and services, now has to sort through of great ideas that we can do for the Minnesota Book Awards. Really that's a key, is you have a chance to do some different things and use that technology. One of the things we've probably all seen a lot of events and a lot of galas, and more often than not, it's a mistake to just try and take what you did and now do it in front of a camera because the dynamic is so different. So I mean, that's probably your biggest piece right there. Also, don't underestimate the generosity of your folks. I mentioned before, they want you to succeed. They love your cause and they're there with you. The idea of tickets versus gifts, we were very worried in making that decision. How are people going to buy their ticket? And the tickets were much lower than what we normally did. A normal ticket at Opus and Olives in person is $150. We had tickets at $50. And then we had some other price points that people will go to because they want to give more. And as Laura said, we built that ticketing form with a spot to say, hey, do you want to add an extra gift? And, dozens and dozens and dozens of people buying their tickets, adding on a gift, and then giving a gift that night. So there wasn't really anything there. Sponsors, as I mentioned, they stayed with us. And one of the things that was kind of illuminating and humbling for me was that we signed up most of our sponsors before we knew exactly what we were going to be able to offer them. We didn't know the logistics of how the ticketing was going to work yet. We were, proverbial building that plane while we flew it. And it didn't matter to them. They wanted to support the event. We had so many sponsors say, look, our relationship with you isn't about this event. It's about the cause. And so people will stick with you. A real nuts and bolts thing we found out the hard way is people do not like taking their cell phone and recording a little video of themselves and sending it in to you. We had this wonderful plan for the pre-show of saying, asking each of our sponsors to record a quick message, just, hi, I'm Greg, I'm with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. So glad that we can sponsor Opus and Olives tonight. Hit send and get that to us ahead of time. Of our 40 sponsors, we had one did it. And for the video kind of centerpiece of the evening, same thing, we asked community members to do that. And Kim Horton, our director of communications, was pulling teeth to get people to do it. It seems really easy, but what we found out is that that's a much harder lift than we thought. So that's one kind of, buyer beware. And then, I think one of the big things is just, it's okay to be afraid. This is new. You're doing something new. You're doing something different. There's a whole lot of uncertainties and unknowns. It's going to freak you out. Yep. Liz, Laura, how many times did we wake up at 3 in the morning and go, oh my God, what about, and it all worked. And the flip side of that is have fun. You can do really cool, really neat things that you couldn't otherwise do. You get to reapproach your event. You get to have people from 24 states show up at your event. We did some stuff that was really silly and did some pre-recorded segments that were just really silly little skits that people loved. And so that's something too, is just embrace it, just like you would your event in person. Go have fun. Create a space where your donors can engage with you and engage with your mission. And also, the final kind of big sum up for me is they call it special events for a reason. Liz is our director of special events, not director of mundane, run-of-the-mill, just like every other events. And the most painful thing is to watch an infomercial. Sorry if any of you have friends, family, loved ones who work in the infomercial business, but that's not what you want. You want this event to be special. And so remember that and just have fun.
Okay, well, those were some really good final thoughts. And I think with that, we have quite a few questions. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go to those. Okay, so forgive me as I go in and read all of your questions. Okay, here's a really good one. Was there any concern or discussion about keeping the name when you decided to go virtual? Obviously, you wanted to play off the established brand, but since you pointed out that the virtual event is unlike anything else you've done and perhaps different from what you might go back to, did you consider changing the name?
We really didn't. This was, like I said, our 17th year, and it really is a branded event, and it's what the Friends are known for. Our event is so different from fundraising, other fundraising galas here, which I kind of facetiously refer to them as proms, where you get dressed up and you go and you have dinner and you dance and you bid on silent auction items and all that. And this is so different from that I think we were very safe in keeping it branded as it's always been.
Okay. Another person wants to know, were you able to get a better fee structure for the author participation because the author appeared remotely or recorded? And if you don't mind, and you can say no, do you mind ballparking how much it cost?
Well, prepare to have this be painful for you. We don't pay them anything. All the authors come to Opus and Olives for free, not for free, but we have great book sales here. And we pay for their travel, we pay for their hotel, and but we have a solid reputation among our publishing houses. We have connections to all of the publishing houses. And for whatever reason, we've been able to do this without paying author fees for this.
Okay, great. So a few people would like to know if you could walk through the program for the event more. And before that, I did want to say in our internal discussion, as we were kind of talking about what we would discuss today, we talked about the length of the program, and it was an hour and 15 minutes. But one of the things that we discussed among ourselves was, if that seems overwhelming, you could always do a 30-minute or a 45-minute. Better probably to be short and powerful and fun than long and drawn out. Liz, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, another format change that I didn't talk about initially was we only had 4 authors this year as opposed to 5. We had Mo Rocca, and all of our authors have a current book, usually within the last 10 months or so. We like to have them published since the last Opus and Olives. So we did go down to 4 authors, and it sort of came to me, as Greg said, in the middle of the night when I was recruiting authors, and it's just like, well, we don't want to, have this go on and on and on. And so, the event itself, what we had just, you asked about, how it differed. We had this pre-show, which was great fun, where our past authors did a little video saying good luck, and one by one they went through them. And then, the opening with a video, and then we had Mo Rocca live. He did his part live. And then each of his interviews with the other authors was pre-recorded. And in the end, he interviewed himself, which was really kind of cute too. That was a lot of fun. Pre-recording it gave us such an opportunity to keep things short. I mean, shorter. Anyway, there's nothing worse, and I know everybody listening today knows this, than seeing your author get up there and go on and on and on, and you're thinking, get the hook, we've got to end this. There was none of that this year, so that was very helpful. That was very helpful. But what was the rest of your question, Christina? Go down these,
I'm not entirely sure, but the next question from the audience might help, because someone is saying, do you mind walking through your program, which you've done? So if there's anything that's missing, any other tips about the program that you did?
Yeah, real quickly, we had that pre-show, then we had the opening with Beth, our president, then Mo did his opening. Greg was keeping track of kind of doing, one of those thermometer for donations, but it was stacks of books, and we can get into that if somebody's interested. But then it was Mo interviewing an author, and then we had a solicitation, I believe, and then Mo doing 2 more authors, and another message from a board member, and Mo wrapping up with interviewing himself. But all the time saying, donate, scroll down, buy your book, scroll down. And that was about an hour and 15 minutes. I think it went a little bit longer than that, but not much.
And we had 2 pre-recorded video sessions about the Friends in there, one right at the beginning and then one right before the first solicitation. So we did that, and then the solicitation was our Friends president, Beth Burns, and then also another one by a board member who stood in front of the library he went to as a young one and talked about what libraries meant to him. So those were also part of it.
Okay, great. We have about 15 more questions, so I'm going to breeze through some more simple ones. What was the cost of a ticket for the virtual event, and then just out of curiosity, for your last live in-person event?
The 2019 was $150 for an individual ticket, and then you can buy tables, and sponsors had different levels of tables. This year we had what was known as a streaming ticket, and we just made that word up. A streaming ticket was $50, and that gave you access to the event. And then we had couples tickets, and that, Laura, you should be answering this instead of me because I can't remember, but that involved, the party bags were for couples. So Laura, what was that? $200, that was $200. And then a bag, or excuse me, a table was 1,000 or 15,000? It was 1,000, yep. And that got you 3 party bags. And it was just all these different things. We had a benefactor table for $3,000 where it got you 5 party bags and 5 bags of books, sets of all 4 featured books. And then
in previous years, the tickets were $150 per person. So a couple would be $300 and a table would be $1,500.
Okay.
So that's and I will own, we got a little complicated with our different packages. And I think when we do this next year, we'll simplify a little bit.
Sure. I do see questions about going more deeply into the bags, but somebody is asking, how do you do tables virtually?
Yeah, so instead of a table, we called it a party pack. And so the difference is the number of access codes. So the host of their table or of the party, the group, would be responsible then for distributing those 10 access codes to their 10 guests.
Nice, I like that. That takes some of the responsibility off you guys.
Bingo.
It does, and
We
it
didn't
also
have to
goes
worry
to
about
show.
getting names.
But we thought when we were initially planning this too, people could host a party of 10, at their house. And there you go. It wasn't going to happen when the time rolled around. So
Right.
the 10 access codes is definitely the way to go.
So let's talk more about the party bags. And there are a couple of questions, but one quick question. Did you ever entertain putting alcohol in the party bags? And did you decide for or against that very quickly?
We did, but we weren't sure about the ability to distribute alcohol. And, and I don't know the laws in the state of Minnesota. We do have colleagues that we compared events with in another state, and they did in fact include wine. And they also included charcuterie trays, which was much more ambitious than we ever could think, and had those delivered. So I think it's a matter of understanding your state laws and whether or not you can in fact distribute alcohol.
Okay.
It's also a question of price too. We had those party bags at about I think $30 each was our cost.
Yeah,
Liz?
it might have been closer to 40, but we had
40?
budgeted
Yeah.
50 and we came in under that.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we could spend a little more time on the gift bags, the question is, can you spend more time on the gift bags? Did you find a way to move people up to higher ticket levels, like upselling them? Or was it more of a thanks? And I think you've kind of told us about that to people who purchased tickets and what all was included. I know we've talked about it a lot, so if there's anything you think we've forgotten.
I think the main thing is just there will be some people for whom it is a motivator. The reality is you're buying a $50 gift bag for 200 bucks. So it's not like you're making a deal, and you don't want it to be transactional. You want it to be more of a relationship build. And so, but yes, of course, there were some people, my wife, who's like, "You're getting Candyland, you're getting the Chicago mix. Oh, where do I buy?" I'm like, "Honey, I get in free." But so we had some of that. But I think people they know what they're planning to spend, and so we put the price points out there and told them what they'd get, and they came in when they did. And we had some people who they'd always bought bigger tickets. They bought a $50 ticket. They made their gift that night. So.
And I will say, yeah, trying to figure out, we sold out of party bags. We probably could have sold more. And in fact, once they started hitting the airwaves on Facebook and all that, I got calls from acquaintances that, saying, I really want a party bag, and they're gone, So, and I have no advice to give you on that as far as how many party bags to buy. You're not going to know. We do have leftover wine glasses, but we ran out of party bags. So
how many total did you say you made?
We 260, 200.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
260.
Yeah. I think next year we'll order 300 or more.
Yeah, and I'll just say too that Liz ordered all of the supplies herself, and then as staff and volunteers, we all masked up and gathered outside to assemble the party bags. But there are vendors too who will distribute those for you, and then you don't have to commit to a certain number in advance. But we needed to order all the supplies in advance.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. That's good information. Okay, so now someone is wondering, which mobile bidding platform did you use? Was there a bidding option within the event platform?
Well, there was no bidding. We don't do a silent auction or live auction or anything like that. So it was strictly the donate now button. And Laura, what was that for? Was that directly to Razor's Edge or?
Yeah, so because we use Razor's Edge, we built our online donation forms in that platform, and that's where we funneled all the gifts. And then our text to give platform is called Snowball or AtPay, and we've used them for a number of years and have, nothing but good things to say about that.
And we did text to give too, was
Yeah.
another option.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about, let's see, how many total people were working the event, if you would, and how did that work?
Well, because we had the production company and they were based in New York City, the whole production scene was in New York City and they handled it. And that, that's what you're paying for, is for them to handle that. With respect to locally, it was all hands on deck, but I think Laura probably spent the most time that day than anyone. But we had, Laura, will you go through that again? How was the calling set up, and you had sort of different assignments and.
Yeah, certainly. So because we provided unique access codes for all guests, we needed to communicate out, those unique links to everyone. So there was kind of a process of, down to the last minute as ticket sales came in, is making sure everybody had their access code. So I was kind of tracking that. And then during the event as well, we wanted to provide live fundraising updates, but we had gifts coming in through text to give, we had gifts coming in through our online giving form, and we had gifts made in advance. So that was another thing I did the day of the event, is really tracking and tallying that gift. And then we just used a simple Google document to provide updates to Mo Rocca and the production company, so that I could put in, oh, now we're at $25,000 raised, and then they could really relay that information to Mo. So it did really feel like we were giving live updates during the event. The other thing I would say from a technical support standpoint is in our pre-event emails, and I would recommend to email all of your attendees within 24 to 48 hours in advance of the event, and then within 1 to 2 hours in advance of the event, so that they have an email right at the top of their inbox with event details. We just had a phone number that was staffed by our staff, and then we used Microsoft Teams, which is our workplace kind of chat platform, to communicate among staff if we had any errors or technical issues. So that was kind of our strategy for dealing with tech support.
I'm impressed.
And then we had folks kind of assigned to be chat, not moderators, but participators. So when somebody would, say something or, whatnot, just to have a staff member make sure, be like, yeah, I loved Lisa Genova last year too, or she was really great to work with, or just something like that. We had one person whose job it was to be pushing things out on Twitter because she's our big Twitter fan, ultra user. So that was her job for the night. As a gift officer who's so used to being in the room, and my job is to talk to as many people as possible that night, it was weird. I mean, it was really weird because I was sitting right here in this, just typing, and so it's a very different sort of thing. But yeah, think through what do you need to have happen? It's still care and feeding of donors. So
Okay.
how do you do that?
Okay. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not muted. Not muted, great. A couple of rapid fire questions. How many people have attended the virtual event versus the in-person event?
We had 830 households viewing it.
Yeah.
So who knows how many people were sitting watching it.
Okay. And in a normal year, did you say it's about 900?
It's anywhere, the last 3 or 4 years have been anywhere between 900 and 1,000.
Okay, very good. Let's see. One person is asking, were the authors all pre-recorded, or did they do any live interaction at all, or was Mo Rocca the only live person?
Mo was the only one live in person, and which worked out great because he lives in New York City, and so he got over to the studio of the production crew. The others were all taped ahead of time, 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time in their own homes. And the production crew sent them the camera kits and talked them through it. And then Mo also interviewed them on that same day. And it really turned out great because Alex Bornicelli did a cookbook and she was in her kitchen at home and fixing up anchovy toast, while she's talking. And Sue Monk Kidd was at home in North Carolina and sitting in front of her bookshelf. And Quam Berry was doing the same thing in Madison, Wisconsin. And I think that was part of the intimacy. I think people really enjoyed seeing that aspect of the authors. But Mo was only live in between segments. He pre-recorded his own interview and presentation.
And with regard to the different kinds of people that may be listening right now and the size of their library and scalability for this, could you replace Mo Rocca with a local newscaster or someone who, kind of understands that flow of live broadcast, or even a local celebrity? And could you replace the cookbook author with a local chef?
Absolutely. Okay. I think the sky's the limit. All your authors can be local. In fact, we do that, with some of our other donor events. We feature local authors, and our donors love that. I think absolutely. There's no reason you couldn't do that.
Okay. And with the recording of the authors at home, they did that themselves and they provided those recordings to you?
It was very interesting to watch. I spent September 24th doing this. I remember it so well. The production crew has these camera kits that they sent to each of the authors. And then we were scheduled at 4 different times during the day with each author. And on a Zoom call, they talked the authors into how to set up the equipment and how to, do the lighting and everything. And it was very interesting because the Zoom call is going on, but the guy in New York City was seeing what they were sending through these cameras that were connected to phones. And so that part of it was very complicated, and we could have never done it without this production crew. Now, and that might be your best argument to staying local, because then, you can get it done locally.
Okay.
It was a challenge, but they had it.
It's pretty impressive.
It was amazing to watch. I was dumbfounded.
Yeah. So next question, how did the book purchases happen? Because you said you were kind of encouraging people to do that during the event.
Yeah, we had on the kind of main screen that the event was happening on a link to our local independent bookstore, Red Balloon, who is our kind of official bookseller. And they had put together a page with the books of these authors and some of their backlist. And so you could just go right there, place your order online, have it open in a new window, because you don't want people to, all of a sudden they're out of the event because they went to buy books. And we sold about as many books of the current books as we normally do it at an Opus and Olives, sold very few of the backlist, which is different. Usually at Opus and Olives, and I think that's where people, they're there, they can pick up the book, they can look at it. So we didn't sell as many as those, but we did sell a lot of the current run.
And
okay.
Red Balloon, you could either pick them up at Red Balloon or she would ship them out.
Right.
Great. Okay, good. Okay, really only 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Was there any discussion about whether it should only be available live, or did you record it and someone could watch it later but still purchasing a ticket?
It's a really great question. We did record it, and our plan was to make it available after. And then once the event was done and we talked with some of the people who attended and our committee, we decided actually not to make it available to the general public, because if we're going to be doing this again next year, the thought was we don't want people saying, oh, why would I pay? I'll just wait a couple of weeks and then I can, go do it. We did release it as kind of a thank you for a limited time to the people who had purchased a ticket, because we heard people say, oh, I had to, get up and go to the bathroom during that part and I missed it, or, there were a couple of us there and we were talking and I missed a little bit of what was said. So we did send it out to those folks to watch again, but we've not made it available outside of that. So we've kind of kept it as that little unique package, but we are going to have it edited down into kind of a teaser thing for next year.
Okay. And then final question. It sounds like the production company was such a valuable element to your success. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of quantify the return on the production company expense. Were you able to see, we got a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 or something like that, or we couldn't have been as successful? Any words that would maybe make our audience feel that they too could find a production company that is the right size for them if that's something that they wanted?
My take on it, and Liz, Laura, chime in. My take on it is that just like if you're doing a meal, you've got a caterer, and what you can afford will determine how much of that caterer. Are you serving surf and turf, or is it a breakfast buffet? But you're not cooking the meals yourselves, and hauling them over in the back of your car. You need that expertise. And so I don't know how to quantify it except to say that we never would have had a successful event if we had tried to somehow duct tape and, MacGyver may have been from St. Paul in the show, but we could not have MacGyvered this thing anywhere to success without that company.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, especially, and you may be smaller venues and it doesn't apply, but when we're at the River Center for regular Opus and Olives, it just to be in that room costs us between $20,000 and $30,000 just to put on the show, because you pay for the lights, you pay for the podium, the sound guys, you pay for, everything about it. So, there was that expense that we didn't have this year. And with respect to serving everybody dinner, we didn't have that either, and that comes into consideration when you're talking about ticket prices, when you're talking about investing in a production crew. It's very difficult to quantify the return, but for putting on an event during a pandemic virtually, we came very close to, well, we surpassed all of our revised goals, but we came close to doing what we always do. It wasn't that far off.
I'm just pulling up a spreadsheet I've got of budgets. I mean, we had about a 40% reduction in costs for this year versus the year before, and basically, yeah, our net was just about 5 or 6% less than the year before. So, and actually we exceeded our 2015 and 2016 nets, which were in-person events. So, you have to spend money to make money, and it's hard. It was really hard. The hardest thing for me was putting together the budget and try and tell my finance staff what the net was going to be when we were done. It's like, I don't know, you tell me, but it's analogous to, you're going to have various expenses.
Okay.
And I would just offer a recommendation if you do have restrictions with your budget, is to look for unique partnerships with media companies or production companies in your community, or even use it as an opportunity to solicit an in-kind donation.
Okay, that is an excellent tip. I want to say, I think the most valuable thing we learned today was that MacGyver was from St. Paul.
Yeah, so, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. I'm a St. Paul guy, what can I say?
I really appreciate that. Now my day is complete. Well, I want to thank everyone on the line for listening in. I hope this is very helpful. We will send a link out to this recording, and we will also share Greg, Laura, and Liz's information with you. If you have any questions, you can ask me, Christina, and that's Christina@carlbloom.com, or tomorrow when you get the email, you can ask all of our friends at the friends. And we hope you have very successful events, and we're here if you need us. Have a great day. Thank you all so much for joining us. Good luck. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.